Breaking Par is brought to you by Par Breakers Golf Academy in Limerick, Pennsylvania. Powered by Swing Guru 3D swing analysis software. The right move. Find them at www.swingguru.com.
Bill, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks for taking the time out today.
Absolutely, Bernard. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started in golf instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. I was fortunate enough to be actually on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and I just had finished up a semester of college, and one of my personal coaches was looking for an assistant golf professional at the time, and he knew me very well. I used to help him out with a lot of his junior clinics and golf schools, just kind of assisting. And it turned out that I pretty much hopped right into it right there. So that was very exciting for me at a very young age. So I started off as an assistant golf professional working under him, and they had a rather large golf academy connected with the resort. So at a young age, I got to see a lot and got to teach a lot. So that's how I first got into the business, and it's been a fun journey ever since.
Yeah, so I mean, your journey is pretty extensive. I was looking at your page and your history, and you've worked with some really high-ranking players with Gary Gilchrist, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I worked with Gary at his academy as one of his head golf coaches and as his one of his lead assistants, working with the tour players. When I was there, I worked with about 14 tour players on the PGA, LPGA, and Web.com tours. So it was fantastic. I got to work with players, anybody from Yani Tseng when she was #1 in the world, to Shan Chen Fang, who has been a pretty much top 7 player in the world for quite a while now. She's very consistent. To Charles Howell on the PGA Tour, DA Points, Arjun Atwal. So got to really get to spend some time, obviously, working under Gary, who's a fantastic instructor, but also being able to spend that time working with world-class players was fantastic for me. I got to learn a lot, both from their side of the spectrum and then also learning, how Gary not only, teaches and how he has perfected his, we'll say, system over the years, but also how he deals with both the tour player and then also the elite junior, because that's pretty much what his academy is all about, is working with the elite junior golfer. And we get kids from all over the world coming to that academy, hoping to play either collegiately or at the professional level one day. So it was a fantastic experience for me.
Now for you, how do you find, and I'm sure that our listeners are really interested in this, because the difference between a high-ranked player or a player who has a tremendous amount of talent and the average player, which is most of the population on the planet,
Right.
There is an absolute difference. So is there a difference in the way that you go about working with these type of players, and is there actually things that you might work on that is totally different with a high-ranked player as opposed to, like let's say a 20 handicap or a 15 handicap?
Sure, absolutely. So for me, just what I got to see with Gary and then how I also interacted and worked with these high-level players compared to how I would work even with the elite junior or your 20 handicap player, it's very different. Everyone, first of all, will have different goals. Obviously, when you have a player of the caliber of these players on the PGA, LPGA, and Web.com tours, obviously they're already very good. There's a reason they're playing at the highest level in the world. So a lot of time, what I've found working under Gary and learning from Gary is you're making small tweaks that can make a very big difference in the overall outcome of how they're performing in these big events. And the biggest thing that I learned from Gary when working with these players, a lot of times when you are making these small tweaks, you're also there and you're trying to build the player's confidence. And it could be just how you're talking with them, how you're planning out events, how you're teaching them how to train and practice effectively on their own. So I would say that is a little different than how I would even work with the junior to your 20 handicap player. Whereas, let's say when you're working with that 20 handicap player, you do a lot of goal planning. You see kind of where they want to go, but then you're trying to change probably some of their motor patterns that they've been doing over a long period of time that hasn't really allowing them to perform at the level that they would like to, or at least at the, we'll say, I don't want to say consistency because they're already very consistent. It's just not the consistency, obviously, that they want.
Sure.
But when you're working with those higher handicap players, you're getting more involved and you're really trying to change some of those patterns. Whereas with the high-level player, it's minor tweaking and trying to just build their confidence and doing a lot of, let's say, on-course coaching as well. So yeah, it's different. And I would say even with those high-level players on the different tours, you each have to, I mean, you have to coach each player differently. Obviously, everyone's different. Everyone has, they all learn differently. So, you're working with the player in front of you, but yes, to answer your question, it's certainly different working with those high-level players compared to your 20 handicap or even the elite junior.
Sure. I mean, and I know that I would think that once they reach a certain level, mechanics is not really an issue anymore, or technique, or like you said, certain motor skills that are in there that they might have put in that is kind of detrimental to what they want to achieve. It's not a problem. It's more when things are kind of not going their way, or things are not working exactly the way they want to, or let's say their putts per round drop maybe 2 strokes or things like that. That can drop them right out of competition in the top 10, things of that nature. So really what you're saying is it's more, when you're working with a high ranked player, it's more coaching than it is instructing.
Yes, 100%. And that is, obviously, Gary is one of the top coaches in the world. He's top 50, top 100, but he's extremely good at creating relationships with these high-level players and being able to almost get inside their head. He was a very good player as well. He played professionally. So he knows what it's like to be inside the ropes and having the pressure and what these players are encountering in these events. So he's very good at the coaching aspect and getting inside of the player's mind at that level. So that's extremely important for getting a lot of these players to, we'll say, maybe the next level.
Well, don't you think, too, and I find that, I have a lot of players who are single-digit. And but not as much low single digit. I have a few who are low single digit, but most of the ones that I'm dealing with come to me are probably 20, 25 or higher. We get them down to low teens, high single digit, and then once we get them to that point, they can get lower, but it's not, again, as much mechanical type things that we're working on. It's more trying to boost their confidence level, trying to get them to understand that when they make mistakes to let them go, things like that. It's more on the mental side of the game. There might be tiny little things, like you said, that we'll work on with positions or with maybe a thought process of how they have to get a certain thing to happen, and then also too, every once in a while because it's golf, things just kind of go haywire. You have a couple of bad rounds, and then they try to self-analyze, and they start to get into little things that actually take it too far in the wrong direction. So then and there's where the tweaking comes in and things of that nature. So basically, that's a lot of the stuff that you're doing with these high-ranked players. Are you working with a lot of high-ranked players now? that you're up here in Bedminster, New Jersey, which is really not all that far from where we are here. So we're just outside the Philadelphia area, so we're right in the same neck of the woods.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I am at a place called Fiddler's Elbow. We're in Bedminster. We have 54 holes of golf, and we are a private facility. So I still get to work with some high-level amateurs, but then obviously you have everybody at the club level, from your beginner golfer all the way down to that single-digit handicap. So I have a nice variety now of players that I get to work with, which I enjoy. I like kind of mixing it up. I like, having a session with a really good player, and then, an hour later I have somebody that's just starting the game for the first time. So it's very enjoyable for me. But the club I'm at it's a very big club. It keeps me very busy, and I love now that I'm able to work with these players of all these different levels. Not only the high level good amateur, but also that player that just wants to get a little better. So I'm very excited to be where I am at now. I just started here about in, let's see, March. So just a couple months ago, I just came up from Orlando, decided that this was the next step for me. I wanted to become a director of instruction at a high-level private club, so I reluctantly had to leave Gary and the Gilchrist Academy, but I couldn't ask for a better facility to work at right now. It's been fantastic.
That's great to hear, and I guess it's kind of nice kind of being back towards a little bit closer to where you're originally from, because it's you're originally from Rhode Island?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I grew up in Toms River, New Jersey till I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
And then we moved up to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and that's where I spent pretty much most of my time until I was in my early 20s. Yeah, primarily New England, but more Cape Cod than Rhode Island. We do own, my wife and I do own a house in Rhode Island. I did end up working in Rhode Island for a little while. So it's great to be back up here in the Northeast. My wife and I have all of our family and friends up here. I will miss the Florida winters, that's for sure. But we do have a fantastic learning center here at the club that's going to be a real asset for me this winter. So yeah, it's great to be back up here in the Northeast.
Now, do you have anything that's inside here at this club that you're going to be doing throughout the winter?
Yeah, so Fiddler's Elbow has actually they've gone into a big transformation over the last couple of years. It used to be pretty much a corporate-owned club. Now they've really made it a family-oriented club. The membership is boomed. So they've put a lot of money back into the club. So we're going to have a state-of-the-art learning center finished by the end of December. A lot of it is actually going to be funded by the New Jersey PGA, and the New Jersey PGA is actually going to have an office there. So I cannot wait for that. We're going to have all the toys and gadgets that we all obviously love to work with on a daily basis. So we'll have everything from your flight scope, TrackMan, body track. There's talk that gears potentially may be going in there. So Sam Putt Lab. So yes, it's going to be a fantastic winter for me. I've already got a lot of my students already asking about the winter program. So it's everything I've seen from the plans to it just has a lot of potential for this winter for me, so I'm looking forward to it. So I'm not going to have to go back down to Florida. I will go back down there to in January for all the things that we do, for the PGA show.
Sure.
And getting a lot of our credits and going to our seminars, because I'm sure, like me, you enjoy still going to these seminars, always trying to learn and get a little better as a golf coach. So I'll certainly still be doing that in the winter months, but we've got great options here up in Bedminster at Fiddler's Elbow.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most exciting. Well, there's several things that are exciting about being a golf coach, but always having the opportunity to learn from others' experience, and then taking that and then making it your own in some way, some unique way, giving it your own part of you. To help your students. That to me is, and then of course the helping students. I mean, that to me is the most exciting part of the game of being a coach. because when you see them achieve what they were trying to do, and you were instrumental in that, in helping them get there, it's tremendously rewarding, without a doubt. So some of the things that you work on with your players, I'm taking a look at your page here, and I know that for you, like myself, you don't believe in a swing style as much as that every individual has their own swing style, but there are specific things that have to happen in the swing in order for them to be successful. And as I'm looking here on your website, you mentioned functional pivot, and of course low point control, and optimal swing plane. So functional pivot, essentially, that every individual has a different pivot point. So when you are working with them on that, how do you attack that part of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I'll do is I'll put them through a little bit of an assessment to one, kind of see how their body naturally moves, maybe get an idea of what the range of motion is. And then I ask a lot of questions in all of my sessions. And pretty much what I do with all my players is I try and work with all my players and get them into these coaching programs where we're going to be working with each other on a consistent basis. So I'm after the long-term goal. I don't band-aid anything. I don't take any shortcuts. That's the easiest way that I found for players to improve and to reach their goals. So I ask a lot of questions before we begin based on any previous injuries. Do they have bad hips, bad backs? Have they had any surgeries lately? Just to get an idea of kind of how their body might tend to want to move before I even see them swing a golf club. Then I'll run them through these tests, and then I'll get some data from them on the on the body track and flight scope and your 2D video. And then right there we'll sit down and we start going over some things. We do some goal planning, and I pretty much will plan out how we're going to move forward based on the goals that player has told me.
Now, when you're doing that assessment, does optimal swing plane come into play there too? Is to find their swing plane through this testing? I know that for me myself, I do basically a series of tests to find all that information with my players. It kind of trims the fat away and gets us to a point where we can greater understand what the body is capable of, where they can get the best force and power, their angle of attack, their release points, things like that through that testing, instead of trying to say try this, try that, or kind of throwing guesswork in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So typically when we are going through this, pretty much the building of their game plan, with one of the questions is I'll ask, what would be your desired ball flight? If you could pick any ball flight, whether it's left to right, straight, right to left, or would you like to work it, both ways? I like to really see where they would like to get to in regards to ball flight. And then after they'll tell me that, I will allow them to take a look at their video and see their numbers, and I'll say, okay, so this is where we're at right now. In order for us to see this, we're going to have to start, whether it's getting our body to work a certain way, or we need to make sure that we're using the ground a little differently. I'll explain how we need to move forward in order for them to actually get, let's say, that swing plane or swing direction moving in the direction that they actually need to get the club moving in order to see that ball flight. So I'll typically work with the player. Now sometimes somebody, let's say, there's sometimes that players are going to have a much more difficult time actually getting the club maybe on that swing plane that they like, based on maybe some things that their body is doing or some limitations that they may have. And then that's my job as a golf coach to, one, either figure out how we can eventually do that, or how we can maybe get around that and still have them play at a high level and still be able to lower their scores and improve their ball flight. So I'm always trying to work with the player's goals. That's what's important to me. And that's how, what I found over the years is that's how a player gets hooked and they get really motivated to make changes. If you do a lot of planning. They see that you're interested in their improvements. And then from there, you get them hitting better shots. You explain why we're doing it, and then you show them an effective way on how to actually train and practice on their own, because that's what it comes down to. Unfortunately, I can't be there every day when they're practicing, right? Neither could you. It's impossible.
Yep.
So they need to understand, with the game plan we've put in place, how are they going to be able to practice and train effectively on their own? What drills are they going to be able to do, and how are they going to be able to, actually go through those drills in order to see whether it's improved ball striking or a better ball flight or whatever they might be looking for.
Now, as part of that, because you mentioned that you can't be there with them all the time, do you do supervised practice sessions with your players?
I would like to eventually. That's something that I was going to try and do when I first got here at the club, and I guess it's a good problem to have. We have such a big membership, and my players have been doing fairly well, but I'm extremely busy with just the coaching program. So the coaching programs that I have are all individual at the moment. So I do see them on a weekly basis, but unfortunately I don't have a supervised program. Practice program, which eventually I need to do. One, I think it's going to be great for all the players, and then two, it's going to make my time, I think, even more effective. But right now, in the early stages of being at a new club, that's been a little more challenging than I actually thought it was going to be. But
yeah, well, especially with a big base like that, and if you have a lot of students, then you're busy. A lot of your hours are taken up working with them individually. So for you to set aside time that is convenient for the bulk of the players to come, let's say, maybe 1 or 2 days a week, where they can come to one of those sessions, and then you can kind of walk the line and remind them of things that they should be doing and things of that nature. It's a lot more difficult to find that time, but that's a good problem to have, that's for sure. And who knows, maybe as you move on, you'll have some other instructors in there helping you who can kind of overview supervised practice. They can do it because they know what you want to see with each individual and what those individuals should be working on each week. They could maybe go look at a chart or something like that and say, okay, here's the students that are here, let's look them up. This is what they need to work on this week. And that can really help. I know that I found that when I'm in that type of situation, I've done that. It's worked out really well for me, because it's tough to find time when you're involved more in individual type things and you have a pretty full book. So the other thing that you mentioned here is low point control, and I know that for myself, since I'm an impact zone certified instructor, a lot of that teaching is based around the low point in the swing. So tell us a little bit about how you're working on that part of the game with your players, and what are some of the things that you're doing to help them achieve that forward swing bottom.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, based on spending a lot of time with, let's say, Gary Gilchrist and also Patty McGowan, who I didn't mention earlier, but she was working at the Gilchrist Academy while I was there. Fantastic lady. She's top 100, top 50 women. She worked under Ledbetter for a really long time. She taught me just as much as Gary did, and she's been fantastic. Now, pretty much how I have learned from all of my coaches, and I still use much of that today, is the pivot, how the body functions, is very important in low point control. I am not necessarily one that just works on impact. I'm always working on maybe what affects impact. So to me, the body pivot is very important. And then the second thing is actually how the player uses the ground in their golf swing, primarily in the transition into the downswing. So those are two things that I work really hard on. And I see the results over and over again when the player has a functional pivot for their body, and then also when they're able to use the ground a little more efficiently maybe in that transition into the downswing, how much better the impact position gets. The player is covering the golf ball better, and they're striking the golf ball so much better as well. So those are the two keys that I focus on when I'm talking about low point control. And then I have a lot of drills that I use as well to allow the player to ingrain that feel and also train effectively on their own.
Yeah, I know that that I use several drills, and a lot of times with the drills that I use, I don't have a ball involved at all. And then what that seems to help the players is it allows them to kind of use that pivot, use that workhorse or the body to create a good position coming into impact, and then get that swing bottom a little bit forward because they're not as much focusing on trying to make everything happen at the ball as opposed to getting things to happen a little bit more ahead of the ball, which allows them to create more power. It also changes the way they use their ground force, things of that nature. So I kind of use like an aim point where they're kind of looking a little bit ahead of that ball as opposed to at the ball. And I found that in that situation, a lot of the other things kind of take care of themselves. And then when we introduce a ball, that low point is going to change. Just because there's always that, as soon as there's a ball in front of you, there's always that kind of still that factor of you just kind of want to strike the ball or try to make power happen just a little bit too early, unless you're a very high-ranked player. And then even then, if we take away the ball and have them do that drill, we'll see their swing bottom is more forward. And then as soon as we introduce a ball, it still might move back a little bit, even at, plus, like +5 handicappers. So which is kind of crazy that that's what happens when the ball is in the way, but it's just the situation of, I think, I don't know whether it's just instinctual, or whether it's things that we've been told in the past, like keep your eye on the ball or things like that. And I still think that a lot of players, even in this day and age, are still trying to keep their eye on the ball more than they are, focusing on the bottom of their swing arc, and some of the other things that are important for them to get the best result. So I just think it's just kind of always in the back of their mind for some reason. So I know that for me, I use a lot of that. But I agree that low point control is tremendously important, and no matter what level player is, and it's something that has to be addressed at a constant time. Now you mentioned technology that you're going to be putting in there for the winter. What exactly are you using at this time?
At this time, I'm using flight scope, body track, and then swing bite for putting. So those three things help me really diagnose and get data from each one of my players. So there's not a whole heck of a lot of guessing. Now, I don't necessarily allow my players to see all that data, but it's primarily for me, and that's going to help me diagnose things even quicker. And then just even getting back to what you just said about impact and how you would train with training aids. And I think training off of the golf ball is so important. I do a lot of that myself. Sometimes, even take the golf club out of their hands, and we do simple things with, if we're talking about a pivot, it might be you're actually making some pivots with a soccer ball, holding a soccer ball in between both of your hands. And just ingraining new feels, new patterns, because like you said, the second you put a golf ball in front of you, the player gets reactive to that ball, and the movement isn't quite the same because they're reactive to the ball and they're not actually moving the body the same way they did when that golf ball wasn't on the ground. So the technology helps me a lot, especially body track. I love flight scope. I used to use TrackMan, but body track and even your swing catalyst, to me, that's the best technology that's out right now. How it can measure the pressure that you're putting into the ground, the trace, the linear trace, and how everything's moving. It makes my life so much simpler because when you're looking at it on 2D, yeah, you can see things, but you can't see it all. There's no way you can see where the pressure is. There's no way you can see all the minute, like let's say backing up in the swing when the body's actually looks and appears like it's moving forward. So that to me is the best technology that I enjoy using, is the body track. And I find that players, if I just get them on the track and we can do some drills while they're on the mat without a golf ball, and they can see the difference in whether it's how their setup is. They can get that feel, come off the mat, try and get that feel off the mat, then get back on the mat and see how close they are to where we need it, or just the movement of, we'll say, the trace, the linear line pretty much, and how they're using the ground. Just without a golf ball, that's so important for me. So technology, I know it helps a lot of us out. Sometimes, unfortunately, technology kind of gets a bad rap, which boggles my mind. It's there as a tool to help us. It doesn't mean that it actually teaches for you. And unfortunately, when you hear a lot of, your commentators on Golf Channel or wherever it might be, sometimes it gets a bad rap, and it's extremely helpful for coaches like myself, and I'm sure you as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll go out on a limb in saying that, or should I say, put myself out on a limb and say that that I believe that a lot of the times when the commentators try to shoot down technology, saying that it's kind of putting too much information in front of the player, that a lot of those players who are using that aren't really getting involved in the numbers as much, and I believe that it's because these commentators are not hands-on instructors, and they're not using this technology on a daily basis like you and myself and other instructors who have the opportunity to have it. I think that they kind of assume that this is what these instructors are doing with it, and I believe that technology in the correct hands, it's like a doctor who has an MRI. He's not going to show he might show the MRI trace like we do with a swing catalyst or body track or something like that. We might show that to a student. But we don't get involved. But we don't get overly crazy about numbers, or get overly crazy. We'll just say, this is this, and this is where we want it to be. So let's just keep on doing these drills and working on this type of stuff, and then let's go back and let's do our little MRI again, and see how it looks, and see if we've seen any improvement. And then we can also see that improvement in ball flight and in what's happening with launch angle and things like that. So that way, when a player changes their ground force, they can shape shots and create things that are differently without trying to think about how they're going to hit the shot. Just feel that motion and then make it happen. So I think that a lot of these guys they're in it to, the commentators is what I mean on that. They're in it to make good TV. And a lot of it's just like if you look at the news, they're talking a lot about things that are detrimental. They don't report about all the good things that happen in the world. They report about the dirty laundry. Hence why Don Henley wrote Dirty Laundry. So because they love dirty laundry. So I believe that viewers or that the public always likes controversy. So I think that as commentators and as producers of these shows, they're going to kind of interject and try to. And right now, because technology is up and coming, they're going to make it controversial, and they're not going to try to promote it as much as try to say, well, all the greats, Ben Hogan didn't use this, or Sam Snead. Yeah, but Sam Snead used to hit balls in his bare feet. So that's how he felt about ground force. I mean, that's how that's how he figured it out. Ben Hogan read divots all day long. So he used the technology of his day to its highest potential. Fortunately for us, in the day and age that we live in, our technology is much more vast and is growing by leaps and bounds as we speak at this moment, and it's absolutely advantageous for us to take advantage of it fully and to use it correctly, which I think the bulk of instructors who have it do use it correctly, not incorrectly.
Yes, absolutely, and I'd agree with you. I mean, again, I always think of Brandel Chambly on the Golf Channel, and you know, he's great. He's great for the Golf Channel, and he's great for TV. But he is turning into almost that shock jock that'll say anything. But it's entertainment, right? But at the end of the day, you would hate. I just don't like to see people that maybe, one, haven't really experienced it, or two, maybe have experienced it and spent time around somebody that maybe wasn't able to translate the information as well as they could, or maybe translate too much information, which, you know, when you have technology, that can be a problem as well. So, but again, it's like you said with the doctor analogy. I mean, it's so important for us to have something that makes our lives easier, that's going to get right to the root problem, and allow us to get that player in front of us better at a faster clip.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that too, that players who have gone to instructors and have gotten more confused because of technology, it's not the technology's fault, it's the instructor's fault for not communicating correctly. And it's no different with a doctor. You're going to go to certain doctors who you have a good rapport with and who is going to get to the root of any problem that you may have to help your longevity. And it's the same thing here. You're going to go to an instructor who can give you the best information that you understand the easiest and can help you improve the fastest. And that has nothing to do with the technology as much as it does with the communication value of the instructor who is giving that technology or using that technology correctly, and not confusing it, or not getting the student confused because of technology. And I really believe too that when Brandel says that kind of stuff, he's just saying that because he's, like you said, it's good TV. I mean, it keeps people interested. People don't want to be bored to death. Golf, I hate to say it, and I love the sport, but golf can be boring enough to watch on television, unless you're highly involved in it. For the average person, they're not going to really get a lot out of it, and in other words, they're not going to be as interested. So these guys are going to do things to keep it interesting and to keep it, keep people engaged and controversial and things like that.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So look, we're kind of winding down the clock here. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. And so give us a little bit of information, because there's just a few questions that I'd always like to ask before we leave. And one is, what is the best way for students who will be interested in working with you, or just want to gather information and ask you a few questions, even if they're not going to directly work with you, because your book is so full right now, which is a good thing to be in.
Right.
But that's great, and that's really good. I'm happy for you. But if they want to get in contact with you, what's their best route to go?
Yeah, the best route to get in contact with me would to go to my website, which would be bs3golf.com. All the information that they could possibly need about me, and my contact information is on there. And there's also, I just came out with a book as well, and all that information is on there as well for the player to kind of take a look at. So that's the best way to get in contact with me. And then I'm on all the social media. I'm on your Facebook, your Twitter, Instagram, you name it. So, and on there, it's BS3 Golf as well.
Great. Awesome. Well, look, best of luck to you at your new location, and hopefully we'll run into each other at the show and get a chance to chat in person. And as we always say here at Breaking Par and Parting, until we meet again, try to keep it in the short grass.
Absolutely, Bernard. Thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now you can take control of your game right now from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. Just go to www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. That's www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. Your game will thank you for it.